Assalamualaikum dan salam sejahtera. PAP meminta rakyat memberi mereka mandat untuk memerintah 5 tahun lagi. Parti Pekerja mendakwa PAP sudah ada mandat tapi rakyat tidak harus memberi cek kosong pada PAP. SDP berkata Parlimen perlukan suara alternatif pembangkang yang berani memperjuangkan kepentingan rakyat. PAP menyanggah Parlimen tidak perlukan pembangkang kerana sudah ada jaminan 12 orang anggota Parlimen tanpa kawasan undi yang boleh bersuara. Apa yang memeranjatkan? Dr. Tan Cheng Bock, mantan anggota Parlimen PAP, menuduh PAP sudah hilang pedoman. PAP sekarang bukan PAP dulu, katanya. Kita bertemu lagi di Wicara. Tinggal 3 hari saja parti politik dibenarkan berkempen. Mungkin di tahap ini ada baiknya kita membincangkan satu isu pokok yang sering timbul di setiap pilihan raya. Apakah perlu Singapura mempunyai suara pembangkang di Parlimen? Dan apakah peranan sebenar pembangkang yang membina atau konstruktif? Tamu kita hari ini seorang pemimpin pembangkang yang lantang dan kontroversial, Dr. Chee Soon Juan dari Singapore Democratic Party, SDP. Selamat datang, Dr. Chee.
Thank you. Thank you so
Dan
much.
juga Encik Nizam Ismail, pengasas Suara Melayu Singapura.
Terima kasih, Cik Basih.
Dr. Chee, if I can start with you, we have seen a few videos of you speaking in Malay, trying to reach out to Malay voters. It's quite good, actually. Is that completely scripted, or did you write it yourself?
I of course, I had to have some help in the translation. There's some phrases here and there that I can, manage. But to carry on to make a proper speech in Malay, I had to have that script there, and to make sure that, it doesn't come out me wanting to say something and then translation gets lost. So I'm trying very hard, believe me.
Well, actually, it's quite cute because you use the English phrases because when you emphasize something, and the mix of English and Malay actually is quite good. I think it reaches out.
Because when,
nicely.
it's when you guys, for example, you guys speak and I'm listening to you, it just becomes very Singaporean.
Yeah.
Right. So I'm just adapting to it, and then.
No, even among Malays, the younger Malays, they mix quite a bit of English and Malay anyway.
Right. I've heard them speak. So.
But how important are Malay voters to SDP, Dr. Chee?
I've always believed that I just cannot see us Singaporeans as dividing the Chinese, Malays, Indians and other. I've just always seen us as integrated. And the thing is that issues, unfortunately, that when we bring it up, say, for example, lower income group, you look at the demographics and it's something which bothers us why is the Malay community disproportionately represented, if that's the right word, in the lower income groups? That I just cannot understand. And I've discussed it with Encik Jufri Mahmud, and for a long time it's just been an issue. Is there a structural problem here in our system whereby the Malay community cannot make that kind of progress? And we've got to examine that.
Maybe Nizam could give some inputs because he's got a lot of experience at grassroots level.
Yeah, I think if you look at the issues more closely, it is not a simple narrative that the Malays are not doing well because of cultural issues. That there is the myth of the lazy native that has perpetuated over the years and through generations. But I think increasingly we find that there is a confluence. I mean, it is a myth to say that a problem affecting the Malay community is a Malay problem, when in truth it is a national issue. And a lot of the issues like educational underattainment, social problems actually cut across different ethnic groups. And it's just a phenomena that the Malays, through various reasons, have been overrepresented in the lower socio-economic group. And therefore, there seems to be a lot of issues affecting the community just because of that overrepresentation. So do you have any thoughts about looking at problems through the national lens rather than through the racial lens?
You know, I'm so glad you brought this question up, Nizam. You know, for me, and I've been harping on this, is the education system. I always see education as a great leveler. If you want to talk about social mobility, sure, you can have apply people with the more income and so on and so forth, but there's nothing like providing everybody when they're starting out in school with the same opportunity in terms of education. We're not seeing this in Singapore. I brought this up during the debate, was it Wednesday? And I said, if you're going to amass and concentrate your so-called elite schools, right, in the Bukit Timah area, and then you then say, okay, you know, you register for primary school in 1 kilometer away and so on and so forth. How many people are able to really go there and move to the Bukit Timah area, right? Then you have your neighborhood schools. This it's just a jingle. Every school is a good school, right? I remember, if I'm not mistaken, it's the vice principal of one of the neighborhood schools. They say, if your schools are all good, then why are the ministers all not? You know, it's a myth. Why not the kids are not registered in those schools, and that kind of situation. And I've seen it. I've seen the resources being given to being provided for some of these top schools versus those in the neighborhood schools. It's something which I think, if we need to rectify anything, it is that our education system.
You brought that point up with Dr. Vivian during the political debate on Wednesday. Following that, you did a video addressing some concerns that you're too aggressive during the debate on TV, that you didn't smile very much.
You're smiling now.
I'm making up for it right now.
Is that fire still burning, Dr. Chee? I've been covering elections the last 20 years. Is that fire still burning, or has age mellowed you?
You know, the one thing that I've always felt is the passion, and that has not gone away. You know, whether you're 30 or whether you're 60, being a Singaporean is being a Singaporean. And, you know, I just want people to look beyond the facade, right? Because it's easy to put on a face to get to look charming and so on. I don't mean that you know, one shouldn't do that. But that authenticity, I hope people can see, in that sense that what we've always believed in is what we show to everybody, and it's not public face and then a private one. And I'm just hoping that Singaporeans will, what you see is what you get.
Nizam, you have any view on that?
The follow-on point of the Chee is this. I think you're obviously someone with lots of fire in the belly, a lot of passion. You know, even your book, you know, never on bended knees, right? You can be more dramatic than that. But I think because of your, you know, very large presence, you know, your very strong oratorical skills in rallies, which I think we're missing right now. But it also means that the Chee Soon Juan personality has been very, very large, and you know, and that's good. And it also attracts some of the conversely, some of the not so positive attention. And so the question to you is, Dr. Chee, has the Chee Soon Juan factor been big or too big for the party? What are your thoughts?
Yes, Nizam, I was just about to ask you whether there's too much of Chee Soon Juan in SDP.
Well, you know, the one thing that we've always at least tried to focus on, and I think it shows in what we're doing, in the sense that to us, policy takes front and center of everything. And so through the years, we've had people coming, and because they saw that we were big on proposing alternative ideas, you know, and then from those we kind of bring it into the craft it into a policy position, and so on and so forth, right? So we've always emphasized on that, so that in the hopes that personalities then take a backseat. Okay, so I'm not sure how to address that, because then elections come about. We want to put our policies forward, so that if you notice, not just in the GE, in a by-election, and this present GE, if you watch some of our videos and what I'm trying to, my speeches, online speeches, I've always tried to make it a point to address some of the policy issues, right? And in doing so, bring up facts, you know. Sometimes, I do worry whether we're being a bit too academic in that sense. You know, you present charts, figures, you know, dates and quotes and so on and so forth. But that's how we try to do it, in that sense, that put things across that we can reason with folks, so that the personality takes a back seat, right? Policies come up front and center. So if anything, we've tried to make sure that, at least I've tried to make sure that something in terms of how big or how small we are within the party is secondary to the ideas that we put forward.
Dr. Cham, in one of your rallies, you said our biggest struggle is not against the PAP, but against what the PAP has done to our minds. Can you explain?
Yeah. You know, a lot of times when we go out on the ground and just talk with the average Singaporeans, there is still a lot of fear, right? And when people go to the polls, after time and time again, people express to us and say, look, we wanted to vote for SDP, we want to vote for the opposition, but when then they go into the voting booth, at the very last minute, they back off because of whatever reasons. Some of them have said, oh, you know, our HDB flat, and then, oh, you know, they're afraid that the government would find out how they vote and so on. So it's been an uphill task trying to convince Singaporeans that don't worry about it because your vote is secret, right? And voting for the opposition, not voting for the PAP, doesn't mean you're against Singapore, right? And that is what we mean when we're just saying, you know, it's the mind. Once you can overcome that, and then you can begin to free up your mind in terms of listening to policies, right? Who presents the better ideas in taking Singapore forward? I am convinced that Singaporeans will vote for us because, as I said, when they come out to us, they tell us, look, we've got to have more representation in Parliament. No, I want to just point out that repeatedly, I've seen repeated surveys, when you ask Singaporeans, do you want to see more opposition in Parliament? I think it was just an overwhelming number, between 70 to 80% said yes, they want to see more opposition in Parliament. But why? If that's the case, then why is it that election in, election out, we're not seeing those kinds of results? And I put down again, a lot of it is fear, and this constant barrage of propaganda from the PAP side saying that the opposition is no good, good for nothing, and that kind of thing. So through the decades, when you have only one TV station, when you have only one newspaper, and I'm talking about SPH and MediaCorp, it's not surprising that Singaporeans are just in terms of their thought get very constrained.
Sorry,
is there still a lot of fear within the Malay community?
Actually, I'd be interested to hear Dr. Chee's views on that. I think you mentioned fear. I think the other point that I think is relevant, depending on one's perspective on things, is whether we are anywhere near the level of openness for a dissenting or critical view to be expressed by a Singaporean without fear of repercussions. Because if we as a society believe that there is only one dominant way of thinking, it means that you don't get the best ideas. You don't get the resilience that you need as a society. So I'd be interested to hear your thoughts, Dr. Chee, about whether we're anywhere near the ideal state.
Oh my goodness! I always think of it on a continuum, or at least across the spectrum in terms of the discipline. And what I mean is with the politics, with the social aspects of society, with the economic, in the economic realm, and one affects the other. If you have a society you're always told, what to think, how to think, what you cannot say, what you cannot in public, and so on and so forth, very soon people internalize it. And then when you internalize it, you get a very controlled society. How does that help us to become more innovative, more creative in that sense? And it's no wonder that if you look at the situation, the most creative societies come from innovative economies, right? Come from the most, the free societies where people are not fearful in terms of, oh, can I do this? Can I do that? So the first question when I want to be creative is, when I'm, being innovative is, am I allowed to do this? Is this against the law? So, you have this problem going forward. And when we are competing in the global stage, in this new era where ideas are just more important than hard work and sweat and toil, we're going to be losing out. And that's what I fear. I really fear for Singapore, and on the innovation side, on the creativity side, and we're going to lose out economically, where entrepreneurs are not going to surface. That's a big worry. That's a big worry.
Dr. Chee, how's the ground feel this time around?
We've been going around, at least for me, it's in Bukit Batok. And when you see people coming up to us and really wanting to express and hoping that their voice can be carried with us into Parliament, you cannot but feel encouraged. But as I said, at the same time, the PAP is there and people are still fearful. And that's why I say, we're hoping that our voters will not just vote intelligently, but courageously as well. There's absolutely no downside to having more opposition MPs in Parliament.
But this is an extraordinary general elections with the COVID-19 still threatening. And the way you campaign as well has changed a lot, There's no mass rallies. A lot's being done online. How do you think this would affect the outcome?
I think it will have an impact. The fact that everything has to be conducted online, and not the entire segment of our society is they're online, especially the older generation. Now, how do we communicate with them? So, as much as possible, we try to get on the ground, and I keep telling whoever we meet on the street, in the coffee shops, to just tell their elderly parents, right? Turn on the videos for them, explain to them, sit down and talk to them, in the hopes that hopefully our message can get through to them. But it's been tremendously difficult in terms of just trying to organize, even wanting to get together in a room of our central executive committee. There are more than 5 of us already. And how do you conduct meetings like that? So it's all been on Zoom, but that is still not optimal in terms of sometimes you just want to be very quick in getting things done and so on and so forth. And it's been a huge difficulty. And we've told, I said, look, even if you held your elections in phase 3, right? When they're talking already about Safe Singapore, that kind of thing. It was just another month. Do it after National Day in August, September. Elections don't have to be called until April next year.
So why do you think they call elections in a big hurry?
They've just, have this giving out the budget and so on and so forth. And they also want to capitalize on this time where people are still afraid, of what's going to happen in the post-COVID era. So it's a very opportunistic play on the PAP side. No, this is not even in March. They were actually thinking of the elections. Can you believe it? When the COVID-19 the pandemic was still evolving and situation was going from bad to worse. All the ministers were out walking about and at that time we warned them. We said, look, the situation is still not very in a way that we can say that we're under control. So why are you doing this? And sure enough, the outbreak came, right? And then they pulled back. But the minute they get the chance again, they're just opportunistically making sure that they get this election. And then after that, if there's a second outbreak, so what? They've got another 4 years before, and they're counting that people will forget.
Nizam, you have a view, Nizam?
I mean, it's obviously less than ideal. And apart from that, there are also risks involved, with campaigning and with more people interacting. And, in the meantime, the numbers are still there. I mean, the community infection rates are still there. We talk about polling. I know there are mitigants, but, if you look at the very risky segments of society, the elderly, having to come out and vote, I think those are really risks that may not, it won't be ideal. And really, there is time before the GE has to be done. So all things considered, I think that there are risks and there are concerns about why the GE is being done right now. Those are my views.
Yeah, I don't know. Yeah, I don't know if that has but the day when we went to nomination center at that school there, apparently I need to go and look, but apparently one of the staff there, or was it a teacher, was tested positive, and we were all looking at each other and saying, "Oh my goodness."
So you think this GE during the COVID puts the opposition at a disadvantage?
I think so. I think so. We cannot have more than 5 people seen in any one group. And sometimes you need more than that in terms of just helping the candidate organize, get things done, carry pamphlets, carry this, that, and the other. So it's been quite a bit of a challenge though. And we've tried to at least keep to the rules and keep to the guidelines. So it has made things tremendously difficult.
I need to ask you a question which has been asked many times, I'm sure. Why isn't an opposition alliance already happening? Is it a question of ego or genuine philosophical differences?
That's a fantastic question, Mr. Basir. I wish I had the answer. I wish I had the answer. As early as 1995, that's almost 25 years ago, I wrote in my first book, Dare to Change, where And at that time, it was the two big parties was WP under JB Jeyaretnam and SDP under Chiam. And I had also just, I said in there that somehow the parties could not necessarily merge, okay, but at least if we could, under the circumstances, because we have this overwhelmingly dominant PAP, that somehow if these two parties would come together, even to form a coalition, an alliance, that would help. 25 years later, oh my gosh, we have how many opposition parties now? But it's not for want of trying. It's not for lack of trying, because I think was it in 2018, we tried to get all the opposition parties together and say, hey, look, let's see, okay? Let's start a conversation, let's start a dialogue and see people can come together and talk about it, because I see very little policy differences, right? We talk about CPF, we talk about, you know, our population trends, we talk about education. And I dare say that most of the parties have this common, at least, outlook. So it boils down to the other factor of, is it personality differences? I don't know. I don't know. I'm just hoping at least that we can, through time, overcome some of these obstacles. I'm just very glad that we made a good start. Okay, as things stand, I am very confident going forward. If it doesn't happen now, at some point in the near future, we will sit down and we will thrash out our differences and hopefully come together on a more, I suppose, united front. But the results in this elections is that very few three-cornered fights, right? So that's very encouraging, and I want to thank all the opposition parties for at least cooperating and putting up that good show that we have going right now.
Nizam, you have a view?
Yeah, I mean, just to follow on the issue of personalities, I think Dr. Chee, you have always advocated that campaigning during elections should be focused on issues rather than personal attacks on personalities. What is your view about the way that the current GE has been conducted? Are we still, caught in this personality attacks, ad hominem attacks, or have we actually made some form of progress?
You know, I said this in the one pre-election rally that we conducted at Hong Lim Park last September. And I said, as sure as the sun rises in the east, you will have the PAP just making ad hominem attacks, going personal and doing character assassination, because if they don't, what else are they going to talk about? Their track record, their performance. They haven't been doing well in the last decade or so. Economic GDP growth has been going down, with us registering the lowest GDP growth of 0.7% in 2019, the lowest in a decade. Productivity has been going nowhere. Unemployment has been going up. Underemployment is a huge problem in Singapore. So what are they going to say, right? So the next best thing that they can do is make sure they pick up somebody, and that somebody is always me, that they can use as a punching bag and distract everybody. You see. So I'm sorry to say that nothing has changed as far as the PAP is concerned. It's always resorting to a tactic like this, which I just feel that, it's not going to do Singapore any good. What's the point if you keep attacking me, and meanwhile all the worries, all the concerns, all the aspirations of our people are not addressed, and then after the 9 days we're back to business as usual, meaning the PAP says one thing and then everything gets done without any kind of debate, without any kind of scrutiny in their policies.
Okay, Dr. Chee, we want to raise a few questions submitted by our friends in Suara Melayu Singapura. Question one from Cikgu Tamrin. He said, you raised the 10 million population question. That was a stroke of genius. And that made the PAP commit to your one no manifesto. At least they achieved one. Did you expect that kind of heated debate with Dr. Vivian?
Yes, I think they were very upset or agitated when we brought up the population trend. And we've said it repeatedly. If you look at it, I think it was March 2019, there was a Straits Times report. And it was the report when Mr. Heng Swee Keat went down to NTU for a forum and a student asked him a question. And he said that the Singapore's population density is not excessive. And then it was reported in the Straits Times that then Mr. Heng cited Mr. Liu Tai Ke, right? He was the former chief planner at the URA. And in that report, the reporter said that mentioned the 10 million population.
Correct. That report has gone viral actually now.
Yes. And if you were just a reader and we didn't attend the forum, and if you would imagine that, hey, Straits Times, if you report it, you know, it must be there, correct? Not? So we said, hey, look, if Mr. Heng says this in that context of excessive or not excessive population density, there must be some idea that's being bandied around by the PAP that of this 10 million population. Well, they got very angry. They said, you know, Mr. Heng never said that. If Mr. Heng never said that and ST reported it, shouldn't Mr. Heng have gone and corrected Straits Times? Which he didn't. At that time, he left it alone, and it's been more than a year already. So now what we're saying is that if that's the case, then go back and pick at Straits Times. Don't right now just, you know, say that, oh, the SDP plucked this from thin air. We didn't. It was based on that report. And if Straits Times didn't report it correctly, then Mr. Heng should have gone after them, and rather than making us, you know, and so on and so forth. And it's just very, it's not something that I think we should be dealing with at this stage. But like you said, we were very glad to see, that Dr. Vivian Balakrishna came out and categorically said he didn't only say no to 10 million, he also said no to 6.9 million. And this is something we will hold him to his word, and we're asking voters to vote us in the parliament so that the PAP will not change its mind.
Nizam, your view?
I think it was a necessary debate to get clarity on, you know, at the highest there was some ambiguity in an article, but at least we got the policy clarity right now for everyone to know. I just want to ask this question to you, Dr. Chee, that, you know, I think the Workers' Party has come out to say that this is a very existential, you know, type of elections, because there is a risk that that could see opposition parties being wiped off representation in Parliament. Question to you: is it a fair statement, or is it, you know, maybe pitching it a little high? I mean, what are your thoughts?
Oh no, I think that is absolutely a very distinct possibility, because everybody thinks that, well, the other constituency, they're going to vote for the opposition, so not in my backyard. I'm just happy that the other constituency is doing it, so I don't have to have opposition to think about voting for the opposition. And then everybody thinks that way, and very soon you get a complete wipeout. No, I don't think it's hyperbole. I don't think we're just trying to strike fear, but it is a distinct possibility. Who would have thought in 2015, right? Could be this big swing back to the PAP from 2011, right? And we came close to even losing Aljunied, GRC. So, you know, I just want voters to think this through very hard. Look, the reality is that we know that most Singaporeans are not going to vote overwhelmingly for all the opposition parties, correct? So at least consider, right, where you feel that the opposition party, the candidate, is something, you know, that who makes sense, right? And you know that they're on solid ground as far as policies are concerned, and they've made it very clear what we intend to do in Parliament, what policies we intend to pursue or hold the government accountable to, hold a government accountable. If you feel that way, right, please don't hesitate in thinking that, oh, the other constituency will vote for the opposition, because we don't want to wake up on after polling day morning and get into this nightmare that we're back to where we were in 1970s, 1980s, that kind of situation.
Another question from Muhammad Amar. He said there is a sudden positive emphasis on the Malay community by the PAP and government. And he asked, are we the swing voters?
Demographically, I mean, because there's so few polls, you know, giving us a sense of where we stand in terms of demographics. But if I had to venture a guess, I would agree. I would say yes.
Why is that?
You know, I think to a certain extent, the PAP has taken the Malay vote for granted, and I think it's something which they have capitalized on, thinking that, oh, you know, the opposition has not really made outreach into the Malay community, so we've got them safely in the bag, right? So all we need to do is make sure that the other categories, the other demographics, we take care of. So I do want to appeal to the Malay community. You know, I dare say that we're the only party, if I'm not mistaken, including the PAP, that have come up with a policy position on the Malay community. We've always maintained, my biggest concern is the education system, which I mentioned earlier on. The colleagues that in our party, we've had long debates, long discussion about why is it that the Malay community is still disadvantaged. Look, I'm speaking in terms of just my own experience. We go door knocking, right? You go to the maisonettes, you go to the 5-room flats, very few Malay households. You go to the 3-room flats, there are plenty of them. And I keep asking, why is that so? I just don't feel that you know, we keep going on like this, where rich are getting richer, right? Poor are getting poorer, and then you interpose on that your ethnic divide. You're looking for trouble. You're really looking for trouble. And I keep I say it's so repugnant. Okay, it's so repugnant whenever I have to see Mr. Daman, Paul, Tambaya, and all the rest of our minority candidates having to go to ELD, right, to apply for a minority certificate. What nonsense is this? Seriously, I don't have to. Why? Because I'm Chinese? This is just, it's just so silly. It's only there to divide us. We must just speak of Singaporean. Nothing else. Absolutely nothing else. So I just don't buy this thing about Malay, a minority candidate in this GRC, Indian minority in that. And I say, let's stop it already. Let's stop it, because this is going to tear our Singaporean society apart. We're treading on dangerous ground. We are.
Nizam?
Yeah, I think I've personally been an advocate of trying to I mean, race is ultimately a fiction, right? I mean, we all come from diverse parts of Asia. I mean, of course, there is the native Malaysia as well, but there's also people coming from the broader archipelago, and to force fit into CMIO is just a very simplistic and maybe a politically expedient exercise. But I think increasingly we should look at all of us as Singaporeans rather than divided along ethnic groupings, and then creating the fiction that there are ethnic problems when there should be national issues, and then addressing them as ethnic problems by creating ethnic-based self-help groups, which all similarly do very similar things. So it's just a very large machinery that comes as a result of an unnecessary classification. I think just to turn things a little bit, Dr. Chee, crystal ball gazing. First of all, do you see a real possibility of SDP parliamentarians at the next parliament? And if you're going to be in parliament, what would be the first set of issues or questions that you will ask?
Well, I worry about, the transparency of the handling of our reserves. We still don't know what's going on in there, and where our funds are being invested in, what the returns are, and so on and so forth. And because of that, how are we going to do an intelligent debate when it comes to budget, right? We're talking about supporting programs, okay? We're advocating retrenchment benefit schemes. We want our 80% of the bottom 80% of our retirees getting at least some sort of an income, and we're advocating $500 for them. And then, everybody gets all heated up because they say, hey, how are we going to pay for all these, right? But without knowing how much we have in the reserves, how do we begin to say, hey, look, this is the income that we are earning from investments, from our interests just generated from our capital? And how do we come to an understanding of how much we can use to help, to invest in retrenched workers, to invest in our elderly? So all these just need the intelligent debate. So this is one thing we want to prosecute as we, these things that are very much in our minds right now. The other big areas, it says, is very close and dear to me, and that's education system, right? So these are some of the things that we want to be talking about, and we're going to make sure that when we get in there, we're going to make sure that we hold their feet to the fire, the promises that they made, and make sure that they answer questions in a very intelligent manner rather than just fob things off and use rhetoric and without any kind of substance.
Okay.
Just give me a second to come back to this point about Singaporean us being divided into all these different ethnic groups. I remember when I was growing up, secondary 3, secondary 4, and that was in the 1960s. And I went to the National Stadium, okay? And that was a time when, Malaysia Cup was on, and we were taking on, all the Malaysian states and everything. And we were crazy. We were crazy in the sense that 7:30, the matches started. We were there about 4:30, the chope seats already. And then the team came on, right? And there was the Dolak Kasims, the Raja Gopals, Matno, Kwa Kim Song. I can tell you, when I look back right now, I never thought of them as Chinese, Malay, Indian. It was just a Singaporean team that we were like crazy about, right? Chu Seng Kui was there, and it was just so, it was there. I don't know how to describe it.
I know how you feel. I went through that era.
Right? You
17. Nizam was
my gosh, and what happened to that?
I was there too.
What happened to, we were dating ourselves, guys, just so. But I'm just saying, I miss that. I miss that so much when we never talked about our ethnic groups, our race. we talked about being Singaporean, and that was something that, I don't know, that just disappeared.
Yeah,
That's
true. That's true.
Just
I'm still in touch with,
we're the poor for it.
right. I'm still in touch with my primary school classmates, Chinese, Indians, Malays, you know, and we are asking the same question, like, what happened? In the 60s, we were just together. We don't care whether you're Indian, Malay, or Chinese. But what happened?
It's sad. It's very sad. It is very sad. We're going to do something about it.
Yeah.
We're going to do something about it.
Something
we have to. We have to.
Dr. Chee, thank you so much for your time. I know you're very busy. We hope to talk to you again in another time, another opportunity, perhaps. Yeah. So in the meantime, good luck, and thank you again for your time with us.
Thanks for having me. Thanks, guys. I really appreciate it. Thank you.
All the best.
Thank you.